Welcome to TopWhiskies Whisky World Cup. The Whisky World Cup is just like the real World Cup, except that America is in with a chance.
You can't get a draw, a tie against Trinidad?
That's why you might notice I'm wearing a USA Rugby World Cup top.
Max, you don't deserve to go to the World Cup.
For obvious reasons. There are two main objectives for the Whisky World Cup. The first is to find the best whiskey from 8 contenders that will work their way across the board. The second is for me to try not to get so drunk that I can't stand up anymore. I know you might be saying that it's really unfair to cut to a clip of an old man falling off the stage, but it's Seb Blatter, so yeah. All right, here we go. We're going to pick out one whiskey at random and put it on the board. Then at the end, we'll have the face-off between the two best whiskeys. Whichever whiskey wins, we're going to do a full review of in a couple of weeks. Are we ready? Are we ready?
We're ready.
Ready. All right, our first whiskey is Kavalan from Taiwan. So can we put that on the board? Yeah, we can. All right. Next is Yamazaki from Japan. Now, all of these whiskeys cost around 50 pounds, and they're also whiskeys that I've never tried before, so I'm pretty excited to give it a go. The next one is Glen Breton from Canada. So, again, I thought by trying to pick about 50 pounds, it would make it a bit more fair. Next, Starward from Australia. And Mackmyra Swedish whiskey from, well, Sweden. Next, Michter's from the US of A. Next one, Paul John from India. And our final competitor, Connemara from Ireland. Okay, let's get started. That is a lot of whiskey. It's a lot, yeah. Up first, it looks like we've got a challenge from the East, Yamazaki Distiller's Edition and Kavalan Single Malt. So let's start with the Yamazaki, because, well, Yamazaki is from Suntory, and you know what that means.
For relaxing times, make it Suntory time.
On the palate, it's light, it's sweet, not particularly full-bodied, light, medium body, really pleasant, fantastic finish. This is going to be a difficult one to beat. Yamazaki was actually the first commercially successful distillery that started in Japan in 1923. Obviously, Japanese whiskey is becoming really popular now, but there's a lot of great stuff coming out of Taiwan, and I've never had this Kavalan before, but I'm really keen to try it. Again, also a really nice nose. Ooh, this is going to be really difficult to tell, to choose between these. The Kavalan it's not quite as complex, but it's very, very smooth, very warming on the palate. It's well integrated. It's got more body than the Yamazaki, and I really like the finish. Oh, this is going to be difficult. The Kavalan comes from the King Car Company, which I know sounds like they sell used cars, but if they do, they also make great whiskey. And this is going to be a controversial start. but I think I'm going to give it to the Kavalan single malt.
What a super goal that is, and away we go with Agahoa, on and on and on, woo!
We now have a really interesting combination. We've got Glen from Canada against Starward from Australia. So this comes from Victoria. We'll start here. It's done in what's basically a sherry cask. It's called Apria. It's basically sherry, but they're not allowed to call it sherry because it comes from Australia. But let's give this a try. Really strong on the nose. Really interesting palate. You've got a lot of flavors coming through, quite a bit of complexity. Light-bodied, but some of the alcohol stings me a tiny bit. Not loads, it's just maybe not as well integrated as what you sometimes see. Okay, so now let's give a try to our Canadian contender. This comes from an ice wine cask. I don't actually know what ice wine is, but it sounds like the most Canadian thing ever. On the nose, it's quite sweet, very light on the palate, very nuanced. It's strange to be comparing these two. I feel that the Australian wine is giving a lot of flavor, a lot of depth that you don't get so much in the Canadian one. That's not to say the Canadian whiskey isn't as nice. I think this is really lovely. It's just, when I'm putting them head to head, I think I prefer the complexity and the flavors that I'm getting from the Australian. So I'm going to have to give this round to the Australian whiskey.
What about that?
But this Canadian whiskey is fantastic. It's still really nice. I definitely enjoy drinking this. But not today, Canada.
You know who else is Canadian? Justin Bieber, the Hitler of music.
This is the kind of cool combinations you get when you have a Whisky World Cup. I never would have thought I'd be trying an American whiskey next to a Swedish whiskey. I didn't really even know they made whiskey in Sweden. Sweden is known for 3 things: adventure novels, chefs, and speaking Swedish. This is actually called Svensk Elk, Svensk, which is Swedish for Swedish, and Elk, which is Swedish for oak. So not a terribly exciting name. It's a fairly new distillery. It's interesting to be looking at just the two of them together in the color. The American bourbon is really dark compared to this Swedish oak. So this is Michter's, which is a fantastic bourbon. It's only recently that Michter's has actually have their own distillery. A lot of what they've been doing have been some interesting non-age statement whiskeys like this rye. I'm looking forward to them producing their own spirits, but for now they've gotten their hands on some fantastic casks and have made some really nice blends. So let's start with that. Let's start with the American bourbon from Michter's. Nice on the nose, bit rubbery, not in a bad way, but just kind of, a lot of American bourbon to me smells like car tires. Don't know why, don't mean it as a bad thing, that's just what I get. Really smooth, quite sweet, alcohol almost non-existent. I could sit here drinking this all day. This is a really, really nice bourbon. It's gonna be a tough one for the Swedes to beat. So this is, again, it's very light, which I'm not surprised from the color on this. It's sweet, it's very little alcohol, not a whole lot of body. I'm a little bit disappointed by the Swedish whiskey. Again, that's not to say I wouldn't like it, and I'm trying to go through these knowing that I have 8 whiskeys to drink and being fair. But I think, for my taste, I think the American bourbon has this one going, has this round. It's a bit more robust to me. It gives a bit more complexity and flavor that I just don't quite get from the Swedish contender.
The US have numbers. Altidore squares it. Dempsey's missed it. Donovan has it. From hope, there is glory.
You saw me pull these out of a wooden bowl. This is completely random. I did not plan this color scheme. This just happened. This is the kind of magic that happens at the Whisky World Cup. So we have India, Paul John, and we've got Connemara from Ireland. I'm really excited to try these. It'll be an interesting combination. One of the things I like about Connemara is that it's very unique as an Irish whiskey. In fact, there's a bit of a joke that you say, so you like this Irish whiskey that's double distilled, peated, and single malt. So what you're saying is you like Scotch. And it's a fair challenge. It is very unique. I believe that Connemara is the only Irish whiskey that's peated, and that puts it in a unique category. But what's cool about Connemara, and well, let's start trying it, is that it has that peat to it, but the phenol parts per million, ppm, is a lot lower than what you see in a typical Islay whiskey, which is usually has a lot more ppms. This is, I think, is about 14 ppm. Usually in an Islay whiskey, you're looking more at 30. So it's not peaty in an aggressive way. It's more of a lower note, an undercurrent that you tend to see in this kind of whiskey. And that is exactly what it is. It has an amazing mouthfeel. Because of that peat, it makes it a bit more dense on the palate, and that's really nice. It's not sweet. It's difficult to describe, actually. Let me try one more time. The alcohol is well integrated. You get a lot of earthy notes. This is a really enjoyable whiskey, and the reason that I picked this one for this lineup is that it's unique amongst Irish whiskeys, and it's something that I think is really appealing. But now let's move to India. I know that you don't really care because you're just watching this as a video, but for me, I just think it's really cool to be going from Ireland to India. So this is Paul John, which is not a particularly Indian name. It has nothing to do with half of a particularly popular rock band. Now, normally in these videos, I would cut to a clip of the Beatles playing Yellow Submarine, but who can afford the rights? So instead, I'll play this. And I'll hope that Ron Howard doesn't get mad at me stealing his joke from Arrested Development. On the nose, it's really sweet. Really enticing, quite candied, like caramel candy. I think actually, of all of these quarterfinalists, this is going to be the most difficult one for me to decide. These are so different. The Indian whiskey is sweet. It's what you would like in a hot climate. One of the things that's interesting about Indian whiskey is that it matures a lot faster when it's in the barrels. So if you take a Scotch whiskey, the angel share when it's maturing is usually about 1 or 2%. For an Indian whiskey like this one, the angels are quite greedy. They take about 10% a year. So while they're taking a lot more of the stock, it means that the whiskey can mature faster. So even though this won't be an old whiskey, you get a lot of interesting flavors that would take longer in an Irish whiskey to come through. And I like those sort of candied flavors in this. Again, the complete opposite here. Those earthy, peaty tones you get in this Irish whiskey is so nice. And I mean, it's in some ways, it's not representative of a lot of whiskey that you tend to get in Ireland. But I like that. it's special, it's unique, and I love the story behind it because they're trying to do something that no one else has done in Ireland. Ooh, this is going to be a really tough decision. Okay, I got this. This is a really, really tight quarterfinal. But final shootout, I think I've got to give it to Ireland. It's really difficult. I love this Indian whiskey. It's cool. It gives you a lot of interesting flavors. But I think that the alcohol is a bit harsher in it, and it's not quite as pleasant to drink. So, quarterfinal for Ireland.
And it could just be the match winner for the Republic of Ireland.
Here we go. Our first semi-final is between Australia and Kavalan from Taiwan. Interesting combinations. I'm excited. Are you excited?
I'm very excited.
Good. All right. Should we start with the Australian?
Yeah.
All right. What I like about this Australian whiskey is a lot of times you talk about whiskey and you focus on casks, and that's what a lot of the marketing is about. But Starward is a bit different. They talk a lot about what goes into the stuff before it's actually put into the barrel. They talk a lot about the barley, which comes from Melbourne. It ferments for 72 hours, and I kind of think that that's important. A lot of the story of whiskey is how it's made versus just how it sits in the cask. And they focus on distillation, they focus on fermentation and the whole package of whiskey. And I think that's really interesting. And they're definitely appealing more to a whiskey connoisseur, someone who's not just going to go in for whatever cask it happens to be finished in. That said, this is finished in the Apria casks, which is similar to sherry. But there's a lot more going on here in Australia, and it is nice. That is really nice. It, as I said before, quite strong, lots of flavors that it gives you. And now to Taiwan. Again, this is a difficult decision, but I do think I'm going to need to give this to Australia.
2-0 Australia, and the gold round is over.
And that's because Australia's giving me a lot more flavor. It's a lot more complex. I feel like the Kavalan is lovely, and I could, honestly, I'm choosing between two fantastic whiskeys, but the Taiwanese whiskey is not quite as fulfilling. It's not quite as challenging. I think that what we're getting in Australia is more complexity and more flavor coming through. I think that Taiwan, and actually similar to Japanese whiskey, is that perfectly executed, very drinkable, very enjoyable whiskey. But in this case, in this particular pairing, it's missing the wow factor. It's just not quite as impressive, but still a fantastic whiskey. Our second semi-final round is between the United States and Ireland. Interesting non-whiskey fact. There are actually more people in the United States that claim Irish descent than people that live in Ireland. I don't really know what that tells us about the United States or Ireland, but that's a fact. I also think I just slurred the word Ireland. It's possible I've had a lot of whiskey to drink so far. But, you know, I mean, I'm committed. We've got to do this. You can't stop at the second semi-final. So, here we go. Whew. As I said before, the Connemara is unique amongst Irish whiskey with that peat. And, well, I'll be glad to try it again. It's this one, isn't it? Don't want to get those mixed up. It's well integrated. It's a great experience. Experience sounds like a weird thing to say when you're talking about whiskey, but I just love that small peat that just gives it that kick, that secondary note. It's really elegant the way they do it. It sort of reminds me of Lagavulin 8-year-old, where it's not hitting you across the face with that peat. It's just giving you a tiny taste of it to just give more complexity and flavor to the whiskey. I really like the way they do that. But that's more my palate. You know, I'm not a massive PD whiskey fan, and I know there'll be loads of you out there that really enjoy PD whiskey. This is not like a Laphroaig. I'd maybe put it more in the category of like those lighter Lagavulins, maybe a Bruichladdich. It's not as strong as an Islay whiskey, but that's not what I personally enjoy as much. And here we go. Let's go to the rye. And the rye is sweet, and it is very American, and I am slightly biased as I stand here wearing my Rugby World Cup shirt. It's great. Michter's is a fantastic brand. I really like what they're doing. But, again, I just think that I'm loving that hint of peat you get with the Connemara. And it'd be interesting if things had worked out earlier, or differently earlier. It would have been interesting to try this rye against the Indian whiskey, Paul John. Those would have been more sort of those flavorsome, sweet whiskeys. But in this particular pairing, I think that I enjoy the complexity and the mouthfeel more for the peated whiskey from Ireland versus the rye from the United States. So, yeah, that's what it's going to have to be.
Surely now, Ireland are on their way to the finals.
All right, here we go for the bronze medal, the United States versus Taiwan. Seems like 1993 all over again. Let's give this a go. These are two very different whiskeys, and what's interesting is they both come from hotter climates. As we talked about a bit earlier, when you're in a hotter climate, it means that it doesn't take quite as long to get as much flavor from your whiskey. Like, again, I keep going back to poor India, which got kicked out in the quarterfinal, which is unfair. They are a fantastic whiskey, and we keep going back to them. But it's that hot climate that creates an interesting flavor. So let's start with the Kavalan from King Car. Again, not used car salesman. And it's nice, it's clean, it's quite an easy mouthfeel. I really enjoy drinking it. There's a lot of subtlety in this whiskey. It's one that you could sit and you could dissect for a while, pick out lots of different flavors. And now let's try the Michter's Rye. This is a fantastic bourbon. I love this rye. I enjoy rye, particularly in cocktails. And when you say cocktails, all of a sudden you feel like you're going down a path towards it's not as good, which isn't fair. Michter's does make a fantastic Manhattan, a really, really nice old-fashioned. I think that for a neat spirit, I might be leaning towards the Kavalan. It's just, to me, this Kavalan has a bit more to offer. It's a bit more complexity. It's a bit more challenging on your palate as a neat spirit. Michter's is fantastic, but shameful bronze goes to Kavalan.
Giving out medals of beautiful gold, so silver, and shameful bronze.
We've arrived. This is the Whisky World Cup final. I know you've been waiting for, I'm not sure how long this video will be, like
We've been waiting so long for this.
Who would have thought we would have gotten this combination? This is the magic of the wooden bowl, which was here earlier. I don't know why I was pointing to it. It's gone now. But that wooden bowl has led us to the inevitable situation of Australia versus Ireland. Here we go. That would have been more dramatic if I was drinking whiskey than just water, but I was trying to clear my palate so I can have this delicious whiskey. Ed, do we start in Ireland or do we start in Australia?
Start with Australia.
Australia, all right. So again, it does have a lot of interesting flavors, and again, it's interesting having just gone through our third place shameful bronze. It actually kind of reminds me of that American Michter's, the rye, because it has a lot of interesting flavors to it. I love that peat. I mean, I know I've been saying that this whole video, and you're probably sick of hearing me say it, but the peat in the Connemara works so well as a backing note that just pulls the whole flavor profile through. Again, not going back, only comparing these two. We're looking at two fantastic whiskeys, and I've definitely decided that no matter what our whiskey budget is, we're going to need to do 2 full reviews of these, so we're definitely going to buy a bottle of both and give you a proper review of both of these whiskeys. It's really difficult to decide, but I think the Aussies have it. Again, it's a really difficult decision. I think there's a lot of interesting things going on in this glass. It's different. It's not like a lot of things I've had before. It has a lot of complexity, a lot of flavor, a lot is coming at you in this whiskey from Australia, and I really, really enjoy it. That's not to take anything away from this fantastic Irish whiskey. I love the peat. This is a worthy second place winner. But there you have it. Australia has won the Whisky World Cup. We're going to do in-depth reviews of our top 3 whiskeys. So remember to subscribe to our channel if you haven't done it already. Just click the subscribe button right there and give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. We'll be putting out new videos every week about whiskey, so remember to subscribe.